PNC News First is presented by the Bank of Guam, the People's Bank. Pizza Hut, we're taking pizza where it's never been before. Taco Bell, the only place where you live Moss. Guam Auto Spot. Colgate, the #1 brand recommended by dentists. And IT&E, Life in Motion.
Live from the Broadcast Center, Akata, Tumon, Guam. Broadcasting in Guam and Saipan, here's Janela Carrera and Clint Rigel with Donna De Jesus and Rebecca Elmore. PNC Sports with Leo Bayumo and Weather with Chelsea Cruz. This is PNC News First.
Hafare and good evening. You're watching PNC's News First. We are live from the Broadcast Center, Akanta in Tumon. I'm Clint Rigel. Topping your news tonight, the Department of Corrections pulled a no-show today at the Civil Service Commission. DOC representatives failed to show up to the first hearing for fired corrections officer Ben Urquizu. His attorney, Robert Koss, meanwhile, says not only was DOC missing, they also haven't processed Urquizu's termination, preventing him from collecting his last paycheck. PNC's Janela Carrera reports.
Noticeably absent from today's status call at the Civil Service Commission for fired corrections officer Benjamin Urquizu was the very agency that fired him, the Department of Corrections. Urquizu's attorney, Robert Koss.
And typically, the Attorney General's office would represent a government agency in a termination case like this, particularly when it involves law enforcement. So I can't speak for them. Oversight, perhaps. Perhaps maybe it's not important.
To make matters worse, on top of pulling a no-show, Koss says DOC has not yet processed Urquizu's termination.
As of yesterday, following up with the agency, they have not processed the employee's termination at the agency level. This has prevented DOA from processing, it's prevented the employee from receiving his pay, as well as accessing his retirement so he has money to live on.
Urquizu was fired on May 19th as a result of an internal affairs investigation into the near-death being of maximum security prisoner Justin Meno on March 29th. DOC says he was let go because he failed to follow standard operating procedures. But Urquizu, in giving his side of the story, notes that he had no choice in delaying his call for help upon finding Meno in the max security yard. He was surrounded by 7 unshackled inmates with no radio because of equipment shortage, and at that moment, feared for his life.
After reading their files, I don't see malfeasance. You know, I see an individual who was trying to do what he was tasked to do, and under very adverse circumstances.
Details of exactly what happened at Post 6 the day of Meno's assault were revealed in the internal affairs investigation when Urquizu submitted it with his appeal papers at the CSC. According to the report, Meno was found at the yard hogtied and unconscious with a laceration to his head. Urquizu says he was sent to Post 6 that day to assist, but upon arriving there, several inmates were already outside of their cells, a clear breach of protocol, since the unit is on lockdown 23 hours a day and inmates are only released on a staggered basis 1 hour at a time. In addition, Urquizu was just one of 2 officers left behind to oversee the entire special housing unit made up of some of DOC's worst criminals.
So I don't see misconduct here, and I don't see cause for dismissal, and not even a reprimand. In fact, my concern is with the agency and the way they placed his life in danger.
Meanwhile, Koss pleaded with Administrative Counsel John Nowakowski to intervene in processing Urquizu's termination, but Nowakowski noted that he does not have the authority to do so.
I can say nothing prevents you from filing a motion prior to my setting of motion dates. If you file an emergency motion requesting a short date,
a second status call has been scheduled for June 13th at 2 p.m. Koss says he will motion for dismissal if DOC or their legal representatives fail to show up again. Janela Carrera, PNC News.
We contacted DOC, but our calls for comment were not returned as of news time. Also at the Civil Service Commission today, another hearing for fired police Colonel Mark Charfaris. Charfaris' legal counsel and the Guam Police Department's attorneys went over scheduling the hearing on the merits. The highest-ranking officer within GPD, Charfaris, was fired in January after being demoted from the rank of colonel to major. Charfris was dismissed after he was seen in a body cam footage berating fellow police officers who were responding to a call of illegal fireworks in Agate on Christmas Eve. At today's hearing, the parties were unable to agree on a hearing date.
We could do the 22nd, 24th, 29th, and 31st. That would work.
Do you have potential for anything in September?
All of September is booked. The next available dates.
The reason why is I can't guarantee that the medical should be resolved by the 15th. That's projected, but.
Well, employee, are you going to take October?
CSC Administrative Counsel John Nowakowski pointed out that because Charfris invoked Public Law 3355, they are limited on time in scheduling the hearing on the merits. They will meet again on June 13th at 2 p.m. to discuss the matter further. Thomas O'Connor, Guam's only qualified elevator inspector, is suing the Department of Public Works for allegedly withholding permits. Attorney Levin Camacho tells PNC that his client is being targeted despite no evidence of any wrongdoing. PNC's Rebecca Elmore has the story.
Again, either the elevator is safe to be operated or it isn't.
There's only one qualified elevator inspector on island, and he's suing the Department of Public Works. Attorney Levin Camacho represents Thomas O'Connor, who is currently the only QEI certified inspector on Guam. He says his client filed a lawsuit against DPW just last week for refusing to issue permits.
To my knowledge, he is authorized to go out to perform the inspections. Once he does that, DPW has an obligation to review it and again to either grant the permit or deny the permit.
This small paper permit can be found inside elevators and is granted by DPW, signifying that the equipment was inspected and meets certain operating standards. But step into any elevator on Guam and chances are the permit says it's expired. According to Attorney Camacho, however, it's not because his client has been neglecting his work.
DPW, they are the ones responsible for reviewing reports or requests for elevator operating licenses, operating permits.
Only Camacho says that hasn't been happening. For the last 4 months, he alleges that DPW has been sitting on these permits.
So if you go into an elevator that has an expired operating permit, it could be because DPW is taking months to do that. But what's unusual in our case is that it wasn't like that before. So prior to this year, it wasn't taking 4 months for DPW to review the reports and to decide whether or not to grant or to deny an operating permit.
A year and a half ago, several businesses wrote to DPW accusing O'Connor of cutting corners, raising prices, and demanding payment up front. At one point, DPW was proposing to cancel O'Connor's commission for willfully failing to perform proper inspections. But when an internal investigation was launched, DPW Director Glenn Leon Guerrero says no evidence of wrongdoing was found. But if there was no evidence to cancel O'Connor's commission, then why is DPW still holding on to the permits?
They're punishing building owners for what DPW's director admitted. They haven't found any evidence of wrongdoing. So, you are not allowed to target inspectors, especially after you admitted that they haven't done anything wrong according to your investigations.
Camacho says a hearing date will be scheduled soon. Reporting for PNC News, I'm Rebecca Elmore.
Amidst growing tensions surrounding North Korea, the Office of Homeland Security, Civil Defense, and a THAAD battalion commander briefed the Mayor's Council of Guam yesterday on how to prepare for a possible missile attack from North Korea. Here's more. Mayor's Council President Mayor Paul McDonald says mayors were briefed by the Office of Homeland Security, Civil Defense, and a THAAD battalion commander on how to prepare for a possible North Korean missile attack.
And in cases where they do shoot a missile towards the island, and to be ready and to brief your family of what to do and where to meet your family, and what can we do to prepare for that possibility.
Mayor McDonald says they were told that the preparations should be similar to preparing for a typhoon. For example, having 3 days worth of food and water, creating an emergency plan, and a plan for contacting family members. But there was at least one major difference.
In case of anything going wrong again, that we pull over to the side of the road and head for cover for the closest concrete building. And, that's the best that we can do, for in case of an emergency. And of course, pulling over on the side of the road, stay out of the road because of the emergency vehicles that may be, going from one point to another.
McDonald says the THAAD commander gave his assurances that the island is well protected by a missile defense system. This was at the request of the mayors and not them. They didn't call the mayors and say, hey, we need to brief you guys.
Well, yes and no, like I said, we've mentioned it to them a couple of weeks ago.
But you said yes and no. What do you mean and no?
I believe that they were preparing the documents already before we asked, and, they had scheduled it already.
Mayors were also briefed on a scheduled series of island-wide tests of the All Hazards Alert Warning System that will be conducted on June 5th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Did they say that testing has anything to do with testing the system in light of a potential North Korea missile strike?
Yes.
Oh, so they said the June 5th advanced warning system testing is in preparation for testing and practicing in case of a missile strike.
Yes.
Mayor McDonald said the main purpose of the briefing was to get information out to island mayors so that they could in turn talk to their communities and ensure that people are prepared and that there is no panic. We asked the mayor what he thought the possibility of a missile attack would be.
Judging from our president, very unpredictable again, and we hope that it'll never happen, that we just hope and pray.
And Mayor McDonald says that they were also assured that the U.S. missile system is comprised not only of the THAAD battery system on Guam, but also the Aegis missile defense systems, both in warships in Japan and in South Korea. Should $430,000 be spent to make repairs to Simon Sanchez High School while we wait for the new Simon Sanchez High School to be built, or should that money go towards the architectural and engineering plans for a new Simon Sanchez High School? Those are the questions that were being weighed by lawmakers today as two competing bills went up for a public hearing this morning. Senator Joe S. San Augustine's Bill 87 would use money from the Capital District Fund to fund immediate repairs to the dilapidated high school, while Senator Michael San Nicolas's Bill 35 would use this money to fund architectural and engineering plans for the construction of a new high school. Senator San Nicolas was extremely critical of the board for not weighing in on previous bills that he believes would have solved facilities funding issues and procurement issues.
This body is making a very concerted effort to get DOE the resources it needs to fix the issues that are holding you back. And the only time that you're showing up and testifying and passing resolutions is to, in my mind, light a match under $430,000 for a 2-year repair that's going to get torn down.
When I'm reading the legislation that you had introduced, it was very specific for architectural and engineering. The issue we have today is an immediate one, which is to repair the 9 classrooms to avoid any possibility of a double session. That is what we are addressing today.
Senator San Nicolas was not convinced with Chairman Peter Alexis Atta's response, saying he still did not understand the rationale behind the board's silence in the past with reference to measures he feels would have solved the facility's funding and procurement problems at Simon Sanchez High School. All right, we'll keep watching PNC. We have more news first after this.